right, so right, little Chachmas Hashem. So what? How do we end off Gvura? Right, we say Veneeman Atta lachios mesim, Baruch Hashem mechayim mesim. So Veneeman Atta lachios mesim is mitzuraf, is the hadama to mechayim mesim, right? Because that's what it is. It functions as like it's one statement. What? Right. It's the chasima for mechayim mesim. So what are we adding by saying that? Veneeman Atta lachios mesim, and you can't say it's a summary because that's melech mesim chayim asmech Yeshua. So what's this adding? Veneeman Atta lachios mesim. You say it every day. Veneeman Atta lachios mesim. I mean, isn't that a given? So what are we ending off with? And it's simple. Mechayim mesim. That's the bracha. Yeah. He says, Veneeman. It's unbelievable what he says. He says, Veneeman Atta lachios mesim, Baruch Hashem mechayim mesim. He says, Peulas. This is like a beautiful idea. Peulas hatachia mitchilasa ve'ad sofa tiarak al yadcha ve'ein la'acher chelik ba. All right. What's he saying?
Translate.
The action of resurrection, right, is from its beginning to the end is only in your hands, and it doesn't. No one else can take a piece of it. No one else can be part of it. What? What's he saying? You have to end off very good. You have to end off with one central point, which is that Koach Hashem is exclusive to His domain. And what is the greatest expression? In other words, in all these other areas, you feel like you're part of the process. You could be. But you have to end off the idea of Gvura recognizing that God, the idea of God's control is exclusive to Him. And what is the greatest expression of that? Tchias HaMesim, because that's what Ian Field is saying. That there's the koach that God expresses there. That's if you want to appreciate the koach Hashem, that's what you look at. Tchias HaMesim, because that shows He has complete control from beginning to end. There's nothing else that it's exclusive to God. You're adding. That's a good point. You're right. Every bracha in Bakasha will end that way, and always ends off with that Hato Shimcha Ulchana Elahodos, right? Or Rofech Cholim O Yisrael, or Mevarach Hashanim. It's always going back to that. The will. It's only God's will that determines these results, right? But I'm saying in the area of control and koach and gvura, it's important to recognize that true control only exists in God's domain. So now we finished gvura. Okay, now just go back and just review again. You always have to have in mind here the flow. You start from the beginning. The first bracha starts off with pure shevach, where a person recognizes Kel Elyon, that God is God, right? But then, even though He's Kel Elyon, Goma Chasam Tovim, that He's invested in man's fate, right? And that there is an idea of Ashkacha, right? And that He relates to us. And then we go into a more particular expression of that, which is in Gvuras Hashem. In other words, when we see manifestations of God, so to speak, we recognize that God has control over this and that, etc. Okay.
We said that would also be included in that.
So now, it would seem like at this point it's a nice time to go right into Bakasha, but yet we say one more thing. The third part to this whole puzzle here, which is we say after this Atta Kadosh, the Shimcha Kadosh. Okay, so obviously hold on. Well, too fast. So what's the problem?
We really like this shot.
I love this shot. What's the problem with Atta Kadosh with Shimcha Kadosh?
You said something like that.
Redundant, right? What's the other problem? In other words, first of all, we say Atta Kadosh Shimcha Kadosh. So it sounds like there's some sort of redundancy. They have another problem, which is that we say you are Kadosh, and then we say your name is Kadosh. And what's the name of God? Right. We like the name. That's a big thing with in Yahadis, the name of God, right? And then we say Ukdoshim. Now, who are the Kedoshim?
Malachim, angel.
Good, that was interesting. That's exactly the machlokas, by the way. It's machlokas whether it's referring to Malachim or us or great people. Hold on. B'chol yom, every day, Yalucha Sela. Right? So what are they doing? Those who are Kadosh do what? Give praise, right? Baruch Atah Hashem, one more time, Hakel HaKadosh. Right? So the word Kadosh here is very prominent, right? It's also interesting that the third bracha we say is very small. Right? Remember, it's one line. We don't have it's not like Gvura or Shevach. Well, I shouldn't say Shevach. I should say recognition of God as a Kadosh Baruch Hu. This is one brief sentence. You are Kadosh, and your name is Kadosh, and those who are Kadosh praise you. You are the God who is Kadosh. All right. So what's going on here? What does Kadosh mean? So we know Kadoshim to you. So Kadosh doesn't mean holy. It means separate. You can use the term sanctified if you want to put a religious emphasis on separate, sanctified, but it means separate. So Atta Kadosh, meaning God is separate. We'll answer Vishnu Kadosh in a second, but if Kadosh means separate, so what's the theme that this part of Shabbat is emphasizing? And don't just say that God is separate. That's why. Think about it. This after this point. Now you have the heter to go ask God for your needs. So why do you end off Shevach with this? Why do you end Shevach with this?
This is like the almost recognition.
One point that's being made is that the notion of God being separate, which means He's inaccessible, right, is a good prelude to Bakasha. What? Okay, that God is something that we can't really know about is a good prelude to Bakasha, because you don't want to go into Bakasha thinking that there's a necessitative response that God is bound by. That if I ask for something, He will respond. Okay, but I think you can go further than that, though, right? Because you're looking in one direction. I think Atta Kadosh is the transition. They do this a lot. Chazal do this a lot. It's a transitionary tefillah. It's taking you from Shevach to Bakasha. So Shevach culminates at Kadosh, and now you're in a state where you can go into Bakasha. Because I don't think Kadosh is just about what you're about to do, but what else is it about?
I mean, the Bakasha that we have are
we have to reflect back on what we did. See, in everything we said, okay? So, wait on. What's his name? Was it? I forgot. It was Kuzari or Chovos Levovos. One of the two says that. I think it was Kuzari. That when it comes to anthropomorphic descriptions of God, so the Torah couldn't just use Kadosh, right? Because even though that is one of the best ways to describe God, so to speak, because you need some way. That's not enough. Like a person would say, well, what does Kadosh mean? But if you understand through Vayishma, whatever, you have it functions as a stepping stone. If you think about it, in the first two brachas, right, even though we're expressing abstract ideas about God, a person does, in a sense, walk out of there thinking he has a certain familiarity with what God is. I know that God's a Somach Nofel and Rofei Cholam. I know that God's a Mechayim Mesim, right? And a person walks out of it, in a sense, developing a certain familiarity, like as if I could understand God at this point, right? So what must he know before he enters into Bakasha? What?
So you can't know.
It's about you can't know. Atta Kadosh. I mean, think about how they wrote this. It's brilliant, right? Okay, I think that's a good thing. But notice you see all these things: Kel Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim. You see all these things about God, identifying things about God. But ultimately, in all those identifications, what do you recognize at the end? Atta Kadosh. That's why it's so brief. But at the end of the day, all you have is one idea: Atta Kadosh. That if we need to describe you in some way, but ultimately you are separate. You are a being that we can't possibly understand. And that's why we say Atta Kadosh, and then what do you say right after that? Meaning, even in the very, I've said this before, even in the very notion of saying Kadosh, even that identification of God is what?
Inadequate.
Well, is inadequate and inaccurate. Yeah. Even that's inaccurate. So what do you say right after that? V'shem Kadosh. What? It's an amazing thing. I mean, you see Chazal. This is one thing to take out of this. You see the Chazal when it comes to, it's amazing. If you ask the average person, I mean, I can tell you from my Tefilah Shurim to the base measures of Nashim, most people, but I guarantee anecdotally, if you ask people, this will be the case. Most people, they think that Tefilah is centered around Bakasha. That's the center of Tefilah, right? And there's no question we must be engaged in Bakasha. We have to, right? But they were so concerned about the state of mind you're in before you go into Bakasha because of the fear that what's going to happen, you're going to feel like through Bakasha, I'm going to say this carefully, that you can somehow relate to God. Not that there's not a relationship, but that you can relate to God. And that notion you have to disabuse yourself of that notion prior to entering into Bakasha. So step by step, all Shevach leads to this culmination of Atta Kadosh, and now you're in a state of mind where now you can go ahead and be Mavakit.